The turbulence hit without warning. The plane lurched violently, oxygen masks dropped, and gasps rippled through the cabin like waves of fear. Somewhere between the thunder of the engines and the cries of terrified passengers, a trembling voice came over the intercom, the captain's voice, strained and shaky, unlike any announcement they'd heard before. "This is your captain speaking. We're experiencing a critical emergency. If there are any trained pilots, any combat pilots on board, please come forward immediately." In the dim cabin light, row 10 remained eerily still. But in seat 10A, a young woman stirred awake, blinking at the chaos. "If you believe in kindness, courage, and the power of second chances, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Ripple Tailies. Let's spread stories that remind us there's still strength in compassion and heroism in the quietest hearts." Her name was Maya Torres, 32 years old, a former U.S. Air Force pilot who hadn't flown a plane in 5 years. The world knew her once as Skyfer, the call sign of one of the most fearless combat pilots to serve overseas. But the uniform was gone now, replaced by a gray hoodie, travel jeans, and an old duffel bag tucked beneath her seat. She was just another face among the passengers, weary, quiet, carrying the invisible weight of a past she tried to bury. The flight had been uneventful until that moment, a routine red-eye from Chicago to Denver. Maya had drifted into a half-sleep, dreaming of desert skis and the hum of engines, when the sudden jolt wrenched her awake. Panic spread fast. A child's cry, a flight attendant shouting directions, the metallic groan of the fuselage under strain. Maya's instincts kicked in before her mind could catch up. She scanned the cabin. The left wing was losing balance. The engines didn't sound synchronized, and the plane was descending too rapidly for the altitude they were at. Then she heard it again, the captain's desperate call for help. The silence that followed was suffocating. Everyone looked around, hoping someone else would rise, someone braver, someone who knew what to do. No one moved. Maya's heart pounded. She hadn't flown since her last mission, the one that ended in disaster. A malfunction in the desert skis had cost her co-pilot, her best friend, his life. The guilt had grounded her ever since. She had promised herself never to step into a cockpit again. But as she looked into the terrified eyes of the passengers, mothers clutching children, an elderly couple whispering prayers, a teenager holding his dog, something inside her shifted. With trembling hands, she unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. "I'm a pilot," she said, her voice barely audible over the chaos. The nearest flight attendant, wide-eyed and pale, nodded and led her toward the cockpit. As she walked down the aisle, heads turned, whispers followed, hope flickered for the first time amid the fear. Inside the cockpit, smoke filled the air, alarms blaring. The captain, a middle-aged man drenched in sweat, was clutching his left arm, likely injured. The co-pilot was unconscious, his head slumped forward against the controls. Maya's military reflexes took over. She pulled the co-pilot's seat back, checked his pulse, then slid into the captain's seat. "Tell me what happened," she demanded. The captain's voice shook. "Hydraulics failed after a lightning strike. Autopilot's gone. We're losing thrust." Maya scanned the dials, her mind running faster than the instruments. The situation was catastrophic, but she had seen worse over hostile airspace, under fire, when seconds meant life or death. Her hands moved over the controls like muscle memory returning from a distant past. "We're not dying today," she murmured under her breath. The next 40 minutes were a blur of adrenaline and focus. The cabin shook as she battled the failing systems. She rerouted power through manual control, adjusted the flaps, and coaxed the crippled aircraft into a shallow descent. Every few seconds she glanced at the captain, who gave weak but steady guidance, trusting her completely. The flight attendants relayed her calm instructions to the passengers, her voice over the intercom steady as steel. "We're in control. Fasten your seatbelts. We're going to be all right." But inside, Maya was breaking. The memories she had fought for years came flooding back: the desert, the explosion, the helpless feeling of losing her wingman. She could almost hear his voice, the final transmission that had haunted her dreams. "You're the best pilot I ever flew with, Skyfer. Don't stop flying." As the ground neared, the storm cleared enough for her to see a small airfield below, not their destination, but a chance. She guided the plane through the thick clouds, breath shallow, every nerve alive. The runway was short, the crosswinds brutal, but she didn't waver. Come on," she whispered to the engines, her fingers steady on the yoke. The wheels screeched against the tarmac, sparks flying, passengers screaming, then silence. The plane slowed, bounced once, and finally rolled to a stop. For a moment the world stood still. Then a wave of cheers and sobs filled the cabin. People unbuckled, embracing strangers, crying in relief. The captain turned to Maya, tears glinting in his eyes. "You just saved 212 lives," he whispered. But Maya didn't answer. She was staring out the windshield, rain streaking down, her reflection trembling in the glass. It was the first time in years she felt the sky forgive her. When emergency crews arrived, passengers streamed out, shaken but alive. Some took pictures of the mysterious woman who had saved them. A mother approached her with her little girl in her arms, whispering thank you over and over. Maya smiled softly but said nothing. She didn't want fame or recognition. She just wanted peace. Later, as she sat on the steps of the emergency vehicle, watching the flashing lights fade into dawn, an old officer approached her, one of the responders who recognized her name. "Torres, Skyfire Torres, we thought you left the service." Maya gave a quiet laugh. "I thought I did," she said, "but maybe the sky wasn't done with me yet." The story went viral within hours. Headlines called her the sleeping hero of Row 10. Former comrades reached out. The world learned of her past, of the combat missions, the loss, and the long silence that followed. But Maya stayed out of the spotlight. Instead, she used the experience to return not to war but to purpose. She began training young pilots, teaching them courage, precision, and empathy, lessons learned not from glory but from pain. Years later, she would sometimes fly again, not military jets but humanitarian missions, delivering aid and supplies where they were needed most. Every time she took off, she'd glance at the empty co-pilot's seat beside her and smile. Somewhere in the skis, she liked to believe her old friend was still flying with her. The passengers from Flight 227 never forgot her. Every anniversary, they would post pictures, messages, and stories about how that night changed them, reminding the world that courage doesn't always wear a uniform, and heroes sometimes sit quietly in Row 10, trying to forget the sky until destiny calls again. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Ripple Tales. Your support helps us keep telling stories of hope, redemption, and the quiet strength that lives in ordinary people. Sparkle's special request: tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Row 10?